Africa is my idea. It's my coinage, as far as I know. There are not many people in the world using the term LouisiAfrica. LouisiAfrica recognizes the fact that the reason Louisiana is a little bit of a different state. It's not the same as Texas or Arkansas or Mississippi. It is creolized, and smartly so, with food and cultural signposts like music. And so LouisiAfrica recognizes the fact that this importation of slavery was a terrible thing, but it resulted in many positive things. And especially here in this state, when the French and Spanish were not as tightly in control of the colonial peoples as were, let's say, the English sometimes or the Dutch, you know. So the colonial life here in Louisiana was enriched by liberal treatment of West African peoples. And the Ashanti, you know, the peoples from Senegambia were so numerous in Louisiana, and they were communicating via percussion late at night. You know, they could talk to each other, even though they may not have had a language in common in terms of a national language, but they had a sense of West African communication that could be expressed in drum beats, you know. So this bag is full of, well, the tambourine. Tambourine probably is more ancient than Africa. It probably comes from Persia. The word tambour, you know, means this thing in Persia. So important. Here's the musician's version. That version of it, you know. It's a little bit awkward and heavy, but it is loud. And you know what to do with this. Let's find an appropriate striker for you. Here is a simple broomstick striker. Now muffle it, please. Yes, there are your two basic tones. And you've got a lot more tones in it as you, oh, nice. You know how to dampen it in between the hits. Oh, yes, you're terrific. Here is, straight out of West Africa, a wood block that it will be used by you similarly with the striker there that you have. Yes, yes. Woo! That rapid trill is outstanding. Good for you. Now hit in other places on the block. Yes, 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 yes. Nice one. This isn't a rare bird. This is a gunkwi. Gunkwi. This is West African sculpture. It's welded. It's made in a fire. Um, it is similar to the double bell go-go instrument, but it is maybe earlier in historic development. Gunkwi sets the tone. Let me put this in your hands. You're so adept at this. I'm very happy to see. Now, yes, yes, that striker will be fine. Kind of lay it on its side because that will make it maybe a little easier to back and forth. Yes, that's your basic go-go bell gunkwi sound. Yes, you're such a natural. Now, muffle it too. Dampen it. Yes. Boy, you're a perfect demonstrator for this work. These bronze bells, people in West Africa were very good at casting bronze, which stunned the Europeans who didn't think that metalwork was something that West Africans could do. But the Benin sculptures proved that they were outstandingly adept at being artful with casting bronze, you know, and other metals.
So these just like shook while they danced.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now here is the agogo bell. Now when you saw the gongqui, you were thinking, I'm pretty sure I've seen an instrument like that or that. And this one is so much similar. This is probably developed by West African slaves in the nation in which more millions of West African slaves were imported during the diaspora. Um, what nation, what South American nation would that be? with more importation of enslaved West African people than any other nation, and far more than came to the United States, by the way. It was Brazil.
Brazil.
So this is thought of as a Brazilian West African instrument. So you see, it was made in a metal frame so that you and I could click it together like that. But
Yeah.
basically, get your striker, please, and you are going to find that it is so much similar. Yeah, if you turn it, exactly. Yes, yes. It's called a go-go bell. A go-go. We Americans say a go-go, but a go-go, and it's considered a bell, as you can tell now how much it ring has. Now dampen it, please. Yes, you've got it under control now. That is a marvelous response. Um, from the Caribbean?
Ooh.
Yes. Beautiful. Boy, you're the best responder I could imagine. Also, African. These shells are, I don't know the name of the tree that goes with it, but they're so resonant, they're so penetrating of sound that you've got to give them pride of place. Yes. What we're doing right now is polyrhythm. That means more than one rhythm happening at the same time. Americans love to go single rhythm. Let's do on the beat, okay? Yes. And that is the basic way an American responds to the opportunity to do some percussion. But Europeans, and especially people from Asia and the continent of Africa, know how to make polyrhythms very much a part of their lives. So you and I were just doing that, and they were overlapping, and they were consonant, but they were two different rhythms. Here's an interesting beater. I don't have the
Cool.
yeah, I don't have the drum that goes with it, but this is an unusual part of what West Africans like when they design things. Um, so this is a little trip into some of the things that came to Louisiana, and you don't have your banjo today, but it is also West African, brought to the United States by slaves and modified by the way by poor people in the Appalachian Mountains. You know, they needed that banjo instrument just like West African people did, and they were both impoverished peoples who know how to get a lot out of a little bit of something. So,
I like that perspective.
thank you. This is my an introduction to my study called LouisiAfrica, and it is ways in which, of course, there's the cooking, there's more dance, there are other instruments that can be brought to bear. Here's one of the one. Oh, I don't have a triangle in here. I'm sorry, I don't. But
a triangle's a good time too.
the triangle is also, it's known as the Fey, which means from the Latin root word for iron. The iron was well played by in plantation days. When slaves were given a drum, someone would say, "No, no, no. They use those to communicate with people on the next plantation. I don't think that's a good idea." That black man smiling because you gave him a drum. No, no, we're going to take that away from him because that's danger. That leads to rebellions. That leads to unnatural fairness in the world.
Right.
So And it did. There were uprisings in Louisiana slave country against the masters numerous times. And let's talk briefly about the Maroons. The Maroons were the people who left the city and left their plantation and went into the woods and never came back. They learned how to live in the swamp. They learned how to do stuff that they could trade with the people in the town. Cutting lumber was for a long time a standard thing in the Maroon communities, and they could cut and fashion that lumber into a usable form and secretly sell it to people in the town who needed inexpensive wood for building cabins and so forth. And so they existed that way and learned how to eat the fish and vermin of the swamp and lived pretty well, if not in actual cabins. But the cabins that slave owners sometimes offered were usually hot and difficult structures anyway.
Yeah.
So the Maroons would be out there for 3 years, 5 years, maybe sometimes longer. But eventually, you could imagine what happened. People in town got frustrated and unhappy about the freedom that these people had bought for themselves. They just didn't get it. They wanted freedom right now, here, 10 miles from here or 5 miles from here, and they got it. So what do you do? What you do is you get a big posse of white folks on horseback, bunch of torches, and you burn out their village. I
Yeah.
hate to say it. You shoot to kill and take out some of the leaders, you hope. So that's the story of a part of Louisiana history that we don't talk much about, the Maroons. It was a cyclical thing, All right, the townspeople would forget about what they did to that community, and the survivors are somehow allowed to come back and resume life on the plantation. But the seed has been planted, and the next generation comes up, and they're like, "I want to do what my grandpa did. He was a Maroon, and he got away, and me, I'm gonna do it too. So that is part of the history of Louisiana, is that rebellious attitude, creatively rebellious. It was not now in some case, in the most extensive case of a slave rebellion, a knife was planted in a cruel master's throat, to get rid of him and then the guns were assembled and the horseback and the slaves moved on to the next plantation. Um, by the way, one of the things that shocked me in my studies of Louisiana history is that I thought that maybe Creole cooking evolved partly from slave women cooking in the evening for their family with a little garden on the side, enslaved, but still a little bit of humanity left in the way they were treated. But that was mostly not the case.
Yeah.
Mostly slave owners meted out the amount of salt and food and other things that were needed for life very carefully, because the whole deal was free labor. Slaves represented profit, free labor. And you didn't want to mess up that equation by giving them too much. And so you limited the amount of calories that were given to your slave property, just enough to keep them alive, just enough to keep them so that they could get up at dawn and work until sunset. Um, you also didn't want to give them much time after sunset. You hoped that they were so dog tired that they slept the whole night through. But of course, West African people knew that slave owners are like counting on them to get some rest before the next hard day in the fields. Well, they had the West African people had something else to do, and that was worship, uh, practice religion, And so they went in the dead of night, in the wee hours of the night, despite their fatigue, despite their weariness, they went through the woods to a protected place, usually a big stand of trees that had not been cut down for some reason, far enough away from the master's hearing and that sort of thing, to be able to do dancing, praying, and it was often called a hush arbor for a place in the woods. Um, Rush or hush because it was had to be secret. It was not allowed. Now, black people were often slaves, often taken, not often, but sometimes taken into churches and taught the Baptist hymns and so forth. And that was a thing that was, acceptably part of the program for slave life. But slaves knew that you didn't just buy into it totally. They knew that they could modify what they're being taught and make it into something that was theirs, not the white man's master's property. So, thank you for listening to my lecture on West Africans in Louisiana and how we evolved a state, a mixed culture, a Creole culture that is all the richer for the hardships and the brilliance of the creativity of West African people as they found ways around the worst constrictions. Thank you for asking these questions and letting me talk. And I
Thank you for being
treasure.
such a local treasure, a
Thank you.
regional treasure, uh, King of Shreveport, whatever we may call you. It's all beautiful. Thank you so much, Robert.
Well, Caddo Schools gave me a platform for working with young people, with the city, in effect, by hiring me to be a Caddo teacher for 30 years and branding me as a non-traditional teacher. That's the best thing in the world that happened to me. And so it gave me the freedom to dig into things and lead my students in what I felt was very productive work, not necessarily following the textbook at all, but instead coming from a deep rootedness of a person who cares deeply about educational life and enhancing the life of people in this region.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.